Yes.
Okay. Ananya, you can start.
Okay, just let me know if I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay. So, good evening and welcome to Enigma, the Sexual History Taking Workshop. First, I'd like to introduce you to our team, that is Noshin, Dia, and myself, Ananya. We are internal event coordinators of MSFC team of AMSA. So, we are okay. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you all for being here and being selected. And we hope that you enjoy this workshop and take away a lot of it from us, sir. Today, we are going to unleash the mystery of sexual history taking with Dr. Ankesh. And by the end of this workshop, we hope each participant can take sexual history comfortably, irrespective of age and gender of the patient. Please keep your videos on so that we can see your beautiful faces, and mute your mic to avoid disturbances. You all can use the chat box for any questions you have, and you all can unmute too, but please make sure that sir has finished talking. And if sir allows you to talk that time, you all can unmute and ask the questions too. Thank you. Noshin will continue from here.
Okay. So we have with us here Dr. Ankesh Sahitya, obstetrician and gynecologist and sexologist and endoscopic surgeon at Puspa Hospital and Brilliance Fertility Center, Mumbai. He has done his MBBS from Padma Shri Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College, Navi Mumbai, DGO from Navrojri Vadya Maternity Hospital, Mumbai, CPS, Mumbai, DNB from Leelavati Hospital and Research Center, MNA, MS in Jan 2016, and MRCGO Part 1 in March 2015. He has done courses on ultrasound, Doppler ultrasound, and a fellowship on advanced laparoscopy. He has completed his residency as a house surgeon at Novrozdi Vadya Maternity Hospital and Dr. R.N. Koper Municipal General Hospital, Mumbai. He has presented more than 10 seminars on various topics surrounding his field of work, have attended more than 20 conferences, setting an example that a doctor is always a student, have presented more than 10 papers and more than 5 posters. He has won many awards in his field of work and has been a faculty at many national conferences. He has contributed in many chapters on his subject and was recently mentioned in a top 12 doctors in India on Instagram for spreading information on COVID-19. So would you like to say something?
Not really. I think you said it all. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I think we can start.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll start with the questions. How to start building a rapport with the patient during sexual history taking?
Not only for sexual history taking, for any taking of history, for any patient, for any condition, the first thing is the rapport. First thing is the environment. You can't be someone who's in a hurry, who wants to get done and see the next patient, or wants to go to the canteen, have a cup of coffee. May it be sexual history or may it be medical history. You have to be very calm, very gentle. Your environment, your personality, the eyes you show the patient, your facial makeup, the way you are, the way you smile. If you don't have that in order, if you aren't a very pleasing and a very calm and a warm person, forget sexual history. You can't take any history. So you have to be someone who's approachable, someone who's a good listener, and you have to ask the correct leading questions.
Okay.
Once you gain the patient's confidence, you can dwell more. But if you don't have the basics right as far as the environment and attitude, then no one will tell you anything. Forget about sexual history. वो बहुत दूर की बात है.
Yes, sir. What are the do's and don'ts of sexual history taking, and how to make the patient comfortable enough to reveal their correct sexual history and not make them feel embarrassed, that creating a safe and secure space for them?
So again, like I said, you can't just jump to sexual history. To start off, ask them their name, where they are from, what they do. You could ask the patient if they want some water, coffee, tea. You can make them feel a little comfortable, a little warm, and a little friendly. You can't directly say about sex or ask them about questions. People take time to open up. Even I wouldn't open up to anybody very easily. It's all about our perspective. Everyone, you have to put yourself in that person's shoes and understand how they're doing it. So I would again say, ask them their name, sit them down, tell them why they are here. They'll know why they are there. If you're sitting to a doctor for a sexual examination, with a sexologist, you can start by asking them their preferences, what exactly happened, ask them if they are comfortable about it, give them the confidence between you and me. This is our room to be examined in. Once the patient agrees with you, patient is concurring with you, then you jump in. You can ask in details about what is the issue, when did they start the sexual life, who's their current partner gender, male or female. It goes gradually. So nothing happens, you can't jump to the main thing in this. This is a little intimate matter. You have to go gradually.
Okay. So how to ask questions in a non-judgmental way without jeopardizing anyone's trauma? Also, what are the appropriate words to use, and how do we know that the patient is telling the right history?
Okay. Now, ideally speaking, I'll answer the last question first. Ideally speaking, you should never lie to your lawyer and lie to your doctor. If you lie to your lawyer and doctor, then I don't think you're really interested in getting help. At the same time, what one can do is, you have to ask the patient if they are ready to start. You have to ask the patient if they are comfortable to start. Now, many a times the patient has been brought in by their relative, by their family member, by their friend. They don't want to go to the doctor. This happens. This happens in India. You are forced to go to the doctor. You are forced to marry. You are forced to do many things. So you have to ask the patient if they are comfortable. Once you have their verbal consent, I repeat, verbal consent, not written consent, it's advisable to start only after that. So gradually, after you have a verbal consent, you can start off. You can ask leading questions about activity. At the same time, with every question, you have to gain their confidence. You can't just think they are your friend and all. Nobody will open up. You open up to anybody in 1 minute? No. So it's a little intimate, personal questions about their genitals, their intimacy, their feelings, their fantasies, their habits, things like that. So you have to. That's the. What was the question again? You said that's a long question it was.
How to ask questions in a non-judgmental way without jeopardizing anyone's trauma? Also, what are the appropriate words to use, and how do we know that the patient is telling the right history?
Absolutely. So basically, you can't be judgmental. There could be someone having an altered sexual orientation. It's absolutely fine. There's no harm. We've been seeing patients from the LGBTQ community. We've been seeing normal patients. We've been seeing bisexual patients. We've been seeing patients who were bisexual but now straight, and vice versa. You have to go as general. As I said, your approach. You can't look shocked. You can't laugh. You can't do all these things. You have to have the same straight face. You have to be very, very sincere to your work. Everyone's a human being. Everybody has their own point of view. Everybody has their own viewpoint. You can't judge anyone. You can't get shocked. You can't make a face like, oh my god, what is she saying? So I would advise everyone to be a little more mature in this matter. Some people are really scared to open up. Some are very chilled out. But you have to be the same. You have to be neutral. The patient's coming to you for the first time. If you're taking the history for the first time, you have to be very, very non-judgmental and not have any bias to any gender or any thoughts. Your own orientation, your own feelings should not reflect on the patient. You should be very, very neutral and open. And you can't make the patient feel that they are doing anything wrong or right. You have to take the history down as a history taking doctor, nothing else.
Okay, the next question is, what should be the tone in which we take a sexual history? Should it be same as taking a medical history, or should it be more compassionate and friendly?
No. Now this is up to the doctor. Now, for example, you spend around 10 minutes with the patient. You've asked them their name. You've asked them their other complaints, their sexual complaints, if they've opened up already, things like that. Your tone depends completely on the way it's gone so far with the patient as far as you reach this question. Second thing is, you have to be, again, you can't be very judgmental over here. You have to have the same straight face, you have to have the same gentle smile on your face, and ask questions gradually. What are they here for? What is their main concern? Then you can ask them, if you don't mind, can I ask you a few personal questions? Then you start asking about their their habits, the reason they are here, and what caused them to see you, how did they hear of you, things like that. What else did you ask me? That long question it was.
Should it be same as taking a medical history, or should it be more compassionate and
So
friendly?
definitely, you can be more compassionate. You can be like, don't worry, I'm listening. And of course, you can't become very dramatic and compassionate. You have to be very honest, and your tone has to be polite. At the same time, audible, not too loud, not too soft. You can't whisper to them. And at the same time, you have to have the private space. You can't, now in medical college, you're in Lady Harding, right? You're in Lady Harding. Which college are you in?
I am from Goa Medical College.
Okay. So I was in, Vadia Maternity Hospital near KM Hospital. Now it was so crowded. There were, a patient sitting in a large room, and there are other patients, and there's a small table. There are interns, there are residents, a lot of people walking around. So for sexual history, if it's better, you have a small private space with maximum one person investigating the patient, with maybe a relative if the patient wants, an assistant of yours if the patient wants. There should not be a group of 10 people looking at the patient's face. It's not correct. Would we like it to be done to ourselves? Not at all. So it has to be a private space, and it has to be very intimate. At the same time, you have to ask them their preferences. If they want to have their relative inside, or some patients, they don't want the relative has no idea on the history. So you have to be alone, and you can ask them, can my assistant sit here? He or she is learning. So that's what I can answer about how do you approach the history.
Uh, could breaking out of the usual professional demeanor help the patients in sharing their personal information with us?
There are two schools of thought over here. There have been some doctors and some psychologists, some therapists who go for a walk with the patient. They go for coffee with the patient. They kind of like, go to the park with the patient. In our field, it's difficult to do that, as a doctor, as a gynecologist, sexologist. But I would say whatever happens, maintain professional demeanor. Breaking out and becoming friendly and saying, "Koi baat nahi, tell me, bol kya hua?" No, you have to maintain your little respect. You have to maintain your ethics. I mean, you try and make the patient comfortable in the setting you have, but you should not break out of that. I am not for that.
Okay. So the next question is how to take history in case of a male doctor and a female patient. What cautions you need to take while taking sexual history of opposite gender?
Okay, this is my everyday story because I only see female patients, so I can answer this better than anyone. So at the same time, over the years, being a gynecologist, a male gynecologist, you have to understand what the patient's going through. You have to imagine she could be your mother, your sister, your, anyone, a female symbol from your house. The patient has left her house. She has taken the effort to look for you, come to your hospital, climbed up the staircase, taken the lift, sat outside, waited for you, and come to your cabin. That means she definitely has some need. She's taken the effort that she's left her private space to come to you. You respect that. Now, I being a quite a good feminist, I would say, being having a mother, elder sister, wife, niece, so I kind of empathize very easily with women. Not necessarily everybody will think like me, but you have to make them very comfortable. You take history, you talk to the patient, all the details are, again, like I said in the previous question, gradually you open up. Now we get patients for various things: sexual disorders, unwanted pregnancies, vaginal infections, UTI, and now in today's generation, having premarital intercourse, and online dating is not very rare, and online dating goes to a lot of offline stuff also. So we get these patients with all these multiple partners and issues. Fortunately, today's day and age, I have had patients who are quite bold and relaxed. The coy, the shyness of the female is not there so much as I had seen 10 years ago, or what my father and his colleagues had seen 35, 40 years ago. So I feel it's easier for us. Secondly, you should never have to examine a patient without a female attendant. No matter how busy you are, no matter how many patients you have, no matter how much the patient trusts you, you have to call in a female attendant, tell the female attendant and the patient, you give them an introduction. For example, if you have a staff nurse called Preeti, you say, Preeti, this is Tanya. She will be examining your breasts. She will be calling me if there's anything required, if your staff is trained. At the same time, you can even ask the patient if she wants the female attendant to be waiting inside the cabin. This is safer for the doctor and the patient as well, medical, legally, and morally also. So, yeah, as a male doctor, this is what I would do.
Okay. If a patient refuses to tell their history, how should we approach and what should be the next step? What if they demand another doctor, perhaps of the same gender?
Absolutely. So, I would never deny. The patient comes. So, the most important person in the hospital or the operation theatre or the room is the patient. You should remember that. But not above your dignity. Now, if a patient has seen you online or she's come to your clinic or heard of you a friend, she's generally okay coming to a male gynec because she's come to a male gynec by her choice. Now, suppose a patient wants to come to you, but she changes her mind. Her consent, her verbal consent, or her mental consent for getting examined changes. Like, no, I can't let this guy touch me. I can't be seen by this person, despite having a female attendant. Absolutely okay. Don't bother. You have a long career. You have a lot of work to get. If she wants a female attendant or a female to examine her, you give her that. The patient has to go back home comfortably. You can't feel bad and say, "मेरे पास patient नहीं आया and I'm not comfortable." So if she wants a female doctor, refer her to your colleague, refer her to any other female doctor in the hospital itself. But don't make her get forced to get examined by you. This is something which I would strongly believe, and I'm sure it's the same for a female doctor and a male patient, vice versa.
Yes.
So the next question is, what are your views on age-specific adolescents or elderly people like 50 years, gender-specific males, wide spectrum of LGBTQ community, and religion-specific beliefs and taboo about sex, or if they are narrow-minded or shy?
Regarding giving history, you mean?
Yeah.
No, absolutely fine. You see, now you have your own personal capacity to take history. What I learned in MBBS, what I learned throughout my PG, what I learn every day, I would go the same way. Now, yes, in the last 5-10 years, I have encountered people from the LGBT community. It's absolutely fine. They are human beings like you and me. You can't be judgmental. You can ask them their preferences, how they want to be addressed. You can ask them their sexual preferences. You can ask them what exactly, and now there are various advices we have for patients on the LGBT community. But if they don't wish to open up with you, if they're feeling you're not approachable, you aren't someone who they be can hear them out, you can't really do much about it. You can't force anyone, can you? So at the same time, you try to be your best. Don't go out of your comfort zone to make anyone very accommodating because of what has happened. Yes, if somebody has a past trauma, somebody's had a history of rape, miscarriage, abortion, you have to be very empathetic. But if despite your highest efforts of highest good, if they don't want to talk to you, you can't do anything. You have to let go. You can ask them, you want to talk to somebody else. That's the best you can do. And they say no, yes, yes. You have to comply, but don't have to lose your morality and dignity for this one particular patient.
Okay, so the next question is, how can we elicit sexual history from patients who are hesitant to share the information due to pressure from other family members or their spouse?
Good question. So we get a lot of patients, girls who come with their mothers or girls who come with their elder sister or with their husband. Now, a particular woman might have a sexual history with her previous partner before marriage. It's very common. She might have had a relationship and must have had a pregnancy and an abortion and then got married to somebody else. At the same time, you get a girl who's coming for a checkup and her mother has no idea that she's sexually active. It's very, very common because nowadays any girl who's 19, 20, 21 might have a partner or boyfriend or something or the other. But at the same time, you have to ask the patient, can I ask you a few questions? Very often the mother looks at her and smiles and the mother gets up and goes out of the room. This happens to be very commonly. There are some patients who say, no, no, doctor, absolutely, ask me whatever you want to ask me. I'm like, Acha. I'm like, can I ask you about your sexual personal history? Then the girl herself says, yeah, but there's nothing. When I go to examine them, behind the examination room with the sister, They say, doctor, actually, yeah, I've had one abortion when I was in college. My mother has no idea I had a boyfriend then, and they open up. So what I have learned over the years, suppose a patient has a pre-booked appointment, not a walk-in patient, and she has history of any sexual problem, and I see her entering with her mother. So I will tell the sister, just send the patient inside first. Once the patient has completed the history, I can make a verbal note in my own code language on it, on the paper. But I will not make sure that the patient gets a problem from going back home that day in the evening. So yeah, that's how I do it. So you have to ask the patient if they're comfortable, because if they're alone, they'll usually open up and talk. They won't lie to you. They come to a doctor. But if they've not been comfortable with their mother or father as opening up, because it's obvious, an unmarried girl won't chat with her parents about her sexual life. So then you have to play the game.
How to ask for sex life of a person?
Very simple. I just told you that. Now you have to take them into confidence. You have to ask them if they are, if they are in that space to talk about it. If they've come to a gynecologist or a sexologist, they will say yes, they are sexually active. Since when they are sexually active, about the number of partners, male partner, female partner. You go into protection, no protection. You go into history of any infections, any form of altered behavior, anything at all. So you have to go gradually. You have to ask them fun if sexually active, currently or in the past. After that, any history of any past, gender orientation, if they've had been bisexual or heterosexual, you can ask them that. But again, it's how you build confidence. You can't jump into all this. The patient will open up to you depending how you are with them.
What to do if we start to feel that the patient is feeling uncomfortable speaking about some things?
See, if the patient is uncomfortable, you can sense it easily that the patient is, not responding, not replying so well. You can ask them, is everything okay? Do you want to continue this? If they seem very, very embarrassed, or they feel unhappy, or they feel, why are we stuck here? You can ask them, should we stop? You want to talk about something else? Or what's bothering you? A patient might say, मुझे इसके बारे में बात नहीं करनी है, I'm not comfortable talking about this topic. Then you should stop idly. You should not force anybody for anything.
The next question we have is, when is it appropriate to take sexual history, and when is it inappropriate and advised not to take sexual history? Like, does sexual history of every patient mandatory?
Not mandatory. If the patient is visiting for a problem which is related to the sexual problems, for example, any form of vaginal infection, any form of pelvic infection, any form of bladder infection, pregnancy, abortion, uterine bleeding, any form of injury, any form of condition which demands like an STD clinic, then it's mandatory. Now, if a patient has come in for any other condition besides what I've mentioned, it's not mandatory. Secondly, if you have an indoor patient who's admitted and the patient is lying in the ward or in the hospital with the relatives, you can't talk of this at that time. It has to be very private. So, at the same time, giving the patient their space, your own personal space with the patient, if that's not fulfilled, it is not compulsory to take sexual history. But yes, for the conditions I mentioned like STIs, STDs, OBGYN problems, you require the history in detail. Infertility, things like that.
The next question is, most rural women are not educated about safe sexual practices and associated diseases. Also, it's a kind of taboo to speak about sexual health and menstrual hygiene. How are they generally approached on this matter and explained about proper age and consent?
So we've given various talks. My wife and I, we've gone to various schools and colleges and given multiple lectures and talks on menstrual, adolescent, sexual health, hygiene. I've given talks on the male health, hygiene, masturbation, things like that. So you mentioned rural area, right? Rural, right? Yeah. So you have to use the same dialect. If you go to an interior village in Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, you can't go with a fancy blazer and jacket and talk about a PPT in English. it won't make sense. You have to alter your presentation mode and medium in the language and dialect of the patient. I always believe in pictorial images. You show a girl, a young girl, adolescent girl, holding her abdomen, pain, periods, infection, hygiene. If you can kind of alter your mode to show that kind of image, then it's easier to do the entire procedure. And at the same time, you can't just jump. Like let's say you have a group of girls who are 13, 14, and you are having that mode that chalo, what is irregular periods, what is hygiene, what is this. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to actually, let's say you go to a rural setup, like you go to a village, you have to actually sit under a banyan tree with all those girls surrounding you and be like an elder sister or a mother like figure and open up gradually. Ask them about their periods, ask them about their body changes, about their concerns, health, hygiene. It's so important to give these talks. Adolescent pregnancy, teenage marriage, child marriage, infections, STIs, abortions. It's so important. The main crux of the problem of population of India and ill health, we are all dependent on the lady of the family, the mother. The mother starts of the health. If the mother is healthy, the family is healthy. These young girls who are the rural area in the urban cities, these young girls are the future of the families. They have to be well educated, well taught about menstrual health and hygiene. But yes, you have to be comfortable in a dialect and the way you give them the information. You can't just give a normal English PPT and be impressed. No, they will not be impressed. You have to reach their mind level, the way they think and they talk.
Okay, so the next question is, what are some other areas where we should consider taking sexual history except OBGY?
So definitely anyone, see OBGY would be top, but of course there are various clinics in the skin department. They are called the skin clinics, the VD clinics for the STDs and STIs. So these are the areas you have to take sexual history of anal sex, oral sex. They are rampant. Oral sex is the first and the largest cause of HIV, hepatitis B in the United States, as far as among the bisexual men. So this has to be, the part you have to take sexual history in the skin clinics. Very, very rarely now it's become quite rare. There has to be something called as cardiac syphilis and brain syphilis. Now it's not existing because of penicillin. So that was when syphilis, the first, second, third stage would affect the heart and the brain. So that doesn't happen now. But of course, you can always have a case of tertiary syphilis. You might require detailed sexual history. But again, I would say the dermatology and the OBGYN clinic would be number one as far as the sexual history.
Is it advisable to use the opportunity of asking sexual history to make an individual more aware of sexual health and taking care of the same?
Yes.
And if they approach with such questions, what resources can we as UGs refer to them?
So, I'll not answer the UG part. I think, once you join MBBS, you are a doctor. You have to behave like one. You can't behave like मैं तो बच्चा हूँ, मैं तो UG हूँ. That attitude I never liked it only. So now how it happens? Now, if you're getting an opportunity to educate somebody, you get a young patient, you get a patient who's in her late teens or early 20s, and she's a virgin, or she's just had a partner and she wants to, she's curious about sexual intercourse, sexual history. If you can educate someone at the beginning of their sexual career on health, hygiene, condoms, protection, contraception, changing of pads often, pads versus tampons. If you get an opportunity, there is no harm in starting this discussion over there. And as a UG, you should be well read yourself. You can't learn with the patient. You have to have one upper hand. You have to know about the pads. You have to know about the tampons. You have to know about all these things yourself. Only if you know, you can take history. And now you have so many new things. There's a menstrual cup. There's these things which girls are using for their periods and all. You have to know all this. But yes, I would say if you are in your UG also, as you said, on an intern, if you have the opportunity to educate someone while taking history, there is no harm at all. It's only good. The patient might remember you 10 years later when she's married.
Okay. So the next question is, do deadly outcomes and shaming, causes of well-known disease among patients, create barrier for history taking? How do we reassure and counsel a patient that there is nothing wrong with them per se? And maybe it's just a normal physiological symptoms and can go away just by proper reassurance and counseling.
What is the first question? The first part? Such a long question. What is the first part?
So it was do deadly outcomes and shaming causes of well-known disease.
What outcomes?
Deadly outcomes and shaming.
Deadly outcomes.
Yeah.
By deadly you mean dangerous.
Yeah.
Like what?
Actually, it was a question asked by a participant.
But by deadly outcomes, what is? I can answer, but I don't know what you mean.
I think they mean if the disease is something has
Okay.
not good,
Deadly
yeah, not
disease.
good prognosis.
No, disease is good, but you should not use words like deadly and everything. Deadly comes from dead, so the idea is not to let anyone die. So yeah. So you're asking about the stigma of the disease, basically the stigma.
Yeah.
So definitely, again, I was working at this hospital called as R.N. Cooper Hospital. It's a very large government hospital in Mumbai. Okay, you must have heard. It's a college now. So there was a particular room called uh, PPT-CT. Now, what this means is, so there were easily like 400 women a day coming for examination for a pregnancy antenatal checkup. Out of 400 women, we would do all 400 ka HIV test. We didn't use the word HIV positive or negative on the paper. So there's something called as PPT-CT, prevention of parent to child transmission. So do you know how it was secretive about HIV? If you are PPT-CT 1, it's negative. If you are PPT-CT 2, it's positive for HIV. The patient is told that she has to go to a different counseling room, meet the counselor. The counselor would come daily for those 2 hours. She would be explained what HIV means. She would be told what a CD4 count means and know the effectivity of the condition. Every government hospital has a counselor room for HIV. If they don't, then I don't know what they are doing. This is such a intimate problem. If the patient is told she has HIV, she's already shit scared because of the what she's heard on the media and WhatsApp and the internet. You cannot write it on a file in positive. You can't give anyone the report besides her own hand. Her husband, her father, her brother, her son might come to collect a report. No. A person having an HIV or an STD positive report, that report goes in the patient's hand. Only after she is duly counseled regarding the after effects, the medication, the prevention of further spread of the condition. Only after all this is done is a woman given her HIV report. At the same time, for the next session, her family members are called, her husband or her whatever, whoever she stays with, and they are made to explain this is not a social stigma, this is not her fault. This could be a blood transfusion, could be a needle injury, could be when she was sexually active with her husband if he had other partners outside. So you have to explain how it occurs, what it is, and what the treatment is. You can't make it a stigma and make it a hoo-ha that oh my god, you're HIV. The resident doctors also are trained and taught not to stare and talk about the patient about it among themselves. You as interns, as UGs, have to be responsible. No patient, rich or poor, diseased or not diseased, is made to feel anything is wrong with them as far as a social stigma. Tomorrow, if we laugh at them, we could be in the position at all, ever. God, unfortunately, that's the case. But you have to take care and behave very well in front of the patient. You can't say, "Hey, wo HIV case hai." No. You have to behave as she's nothing but a person undergoing treatment for a condition which is a little different, and she will be okay. It is your job to make her believe that yes, there is a will, there is a way, and you have to follow the right source.
Okay.
I guess that answers your question of deadly.
How does sexual history play an important role in diagnosis?
Very important. So if the patient has a sexual history which is polygamous, not monogamous, she's had history of being bisexual, history of being having multiple partners, it is very important to investigate by doing certain STD tests like HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis A, VDRL, herpes, syphilis. You have to do investigations. If you don't take the history, how will you investigate? How will you think of all these conditions? So history is important.
Any examples of sexual activity risk assessment tool like Denver?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yes, sir. So examples of sexual activity risk assessment tool like Denver.
Denver.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the city Denver in America?
Actually, it was one of the questions by participants, so I really don't know.
Okay, there is nothing like this, but like I repeated, once you take history and you hear about polygamous relations, you hear about multiple partners, then according the risk is higher. Maybe there's a new scoring system by Denver, but I haven't heard about it. You can look it up. We can look it up together also. But ideally speaking, if the patient is polygamous, multiple partners, unprotected intercourse, no protection, condom used, history of pelvic infections, history of any foul-smelling discharge with any form of color or disorientation, that patient becomes a little more high risk.
Okay.
If the person who asked this question is here, they can ask
Yeah,
it
I
more
would love to learn.
elaborately.
I would
Yeah.
love to learn about Denver. Hmm. I think they mean the post-traumatic organ failure score by Denver. So there's no score like this which I am aware of for sexual risk. But like I said, the simple questions of multiple partners, polygamous nature, those would always give you a higher risk.
If you're shy to unmute, you can just send it to one of us or sir directly, privately. Then he can let you know if there is something like that. So now you have the opportunity to unmute and ask questions yourself. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute.
You can also send the questions to us so we can ask them.
Yeah.
If you think any topic is not addressed here.
Again, you can send it individually to any of us. We'll read it out without reading your name. I suppose there are no questions, but we'll still wait for a few minutes. So before we get any other questions, do you have any experience that you remember while taking sexual history of, we have spectrum of people, very shy, very bold. So do you have any experience that you'll never forget in your life?
Many, Baba, many. So when I was starting off newly, I wasn't so aware of LGBTQ. I was quite naive, and I thought sex means male and female. So we've had patients, come with like two girls together or two men together, very normal, talking normally. And I've asked leading questions, about vaginal sex, penile sex, and I've had two girls telling me that the one girl answering for the other girl. I think no, she's never had sex. We are the partners. And maybe I wasn't so, I didn't have such a straight face then. I was a little like, what? No. So the joke's on me, I know. So I've had the experiences, and there have been certain instances of rural patients where so sad, the a lady walks in with her a man. She's saying, "This is my brother-in-law, my devar," and he's answering her problems of irregular periods, last period date. So she was like with the husband and the husband's brother. So this was like forced polygamous nature because of the family, because he wasn't married. And these are the issues you learn over the years. You laugh about it then, but you realize what must be going on in the family. Like that. I've shared my Instagram handle on the chat, so if anybody has any more questions, they can even reach out to me there. And I have a few videos on OBGYN and sexology. You can have a look.
We would also like to ask the participants if they have any experiences with respect to sexual history taking. You all can share with us, you all can text us, we can read it out if you don't want to expose your name.
Or I mean, it's already 5:45. We'll
Yes,
take
sir.
2-3 questions and accordingly we can decide. I think we covered up so many questions. You guys have construed the questions so well. I think the same participants have sent the questions.
Yes, sir. The
So
same
I
participants.
think we should be done, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
If anybody still
We
wants
haven't
to
received any more
learn,
questions.
if anybody wants to learn still more, then they can ask now, or we can take it up later on mail or something.
Yes, sir. Sure. Thank you so much, sir, for this amazing session. We have covered almost everything about sexual history, inclusive of gender and age. So I'm sure each one of us here can take sexual history comfortably here on.
I'll be so glad if you guys take it. But I'll tell you one thing honestly, Ananya.
Yes, sir.
So there's no book for this. There's no degree for this. How do I learn all this? Me being a male
Experience.
gynaec, I saw my seniors. I myself saw my shortcomings. I saw patients coming and going. I understood what made patients more comfortable, what wasn't comfortable. So you learn out of your own experiences and your own mistakes. No one will hold your hand and teach you one step like this. It is your own experience which is your best teacher.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir, for taking time out for us. We would request everyone to turn their videos on for a picture.
I think we've got a question.
By the
So-
time we have the question, please turn your videos on so we are ready.
So the question is, without for sexual history taking on non-binary or binary male patients having sexual problems, do they approach OBG specialists, or do we have separate clinics as a part of administrative setup?
Very good question. I'll answer it. So we get many males who come in with their own problems and they are not sure whom to go to. So what they could do is they could go initially to a doctor of their choice. For example, it's a male patient. He can go to a male gynaec. They can look up somebody online, or they can go to a hospital and even see the board and go there. The doctor should have some experience in like sexology or venereal diseases if possible. Ideally, a gynaec will, because the gynaec curriculum is such that it covers almost all the STDs, their management, and a little bit of sexology. So if the doctor is handling those situations or not, sometimes there is a general surgeon who is also called as an andrologist. Now, just how there's a gynecologist for female, a general surgeon who's done a course in male infertility and male sexology is called an andrologist. So they also have a lot of knowledge of sexology. So if they want, they can go to someone like that or to a routine gynaec. But usually, to start off for any basic issue, this is enough.
Everybody please turn on your videos. We want to take a picture, just one picture. It will take only 2 minutes. I don't think our participants are interested, so let's just smile. I'll take the picture. Okay, it's done. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on such a short notice. And I know you have to go to hospital now, and you came for just 1 hour for us. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, take care. Bye. All the best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We will be sharing a form on the group after this. You all will have to fill the form for certification. Yes, if you have, we'll also be sharing a feedback form. So please fill it without fear. Thank you guys for participating.